Moto riding. This is going to be a novice track day review. If you're like me and you haven't done a lot of track days, you're probably going to want to learn the ins and outs before you go. Now I can tell you how amazing it was, or I could just show you. Now, if you're any aspiring motorcyclist, you probably imagined about doing a track day, or maybe you've already done some. But in my case, this was my overall second track day, and I had such a great time learning on my first track day a year ago that I decided to do the novice school again. And if you're looking for some more information, you can find it at z2trackdays.com. They do classroom sessions, they do on-track instruction, so you can follow someone around the track, see where the lines are, see where you need to brake, see where you need to accelerate, and then they'll pull you aside afterwards and kind of explain what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. Are you hanging off the bike? Are you not hanging off the bike? Are you doing something erratic? Because part of doing a track day is also learning track day behavior, but we'll get to that in a sec. Important things to remember are bring lots of water, bring sunscreen, prepare to have a great time, because when you go to a track day, it's a lot like going to a concert. Everybody's into the same music, so you're gonna have fun, you're gonna meet new people. Everybody, especially at these Z2 track days that I've done, super nice, really welcoming, and that definitely goes for every instructor that I had the pleasure of meeting for these track day events. Like the novice school was led by Marty on this Yamaha R World Day. He covers what each flag is, what it means, what to be thinking about when you're out on the track. There's really 5 key things that every rider should be paying attention to before you go out on the track. And the first things are flags and what they mean. They'll cover this. You know, the basics are yellow means no passing, red means stop, pull aside to the side of the track. You know, every track day provider might do it a little differently, but for Z2, they cover all that in the novice school, so you'll be totally knowledgeable about once you're out there on the track. Also, once you are out on the track, there are some passing rules, like 6 feet. You need to pass, if you're gonna pass somebody, it has to be with about a budget of 6 feet of space between you. And if you are gonna pass someone, you need to do it on the outside of a turn. I'll show some examples of how to do that, but basically, if somebody is turning to the right, into a right-hand corner, you're not gonna dive up the inside of somebody, especially in novice, and in intermediate's the same. And the only time that passing is really going to be accepted, like race style, is going to be in the advanced group. And even then, you have to remember the mentality of this track day. It's for fun. You're not here winning any trophies. Everybody just wants to have a good time, learn how to ride their bike faster, get better, be a better rider, and go home safely. Because the worst thing that can happen is you lay your bike down, or you lay your bike down into somebody else, and that's the end of your track day. Like, hopefully nobody gets hurt. I was fortunate enough in this R World Yamaha day only. There were fewer bikes on the track, and everybody was super respectful out there, and just lots of fun. Lots of fun. Got to do morning sessions on my FZ09, so I was getting comfortable with the layout and the track conditions, because Sonoma Raceway has been repaved recently. And it is actually like super nice and smooth compared to last year when I did my very first track day. But outside of that, I got to demo some bikes, and just a quick review of some of that experience was the first bike I got to go out on the track demoing was an R1, which I have never ridden on the street before. Was a completely alien experience. You basically are laying on the bike. Like my FZ09, pretty standard position. R1, you're perched on top, your legs feel like your ankles are by your ears, and your wrists are right underneath you. You're kind of like a koala on the back of your mama koala. It feels very alien, especially if you've been riding something else on the track all day. But then once I was following the leader rider and going around on the track on the R1, it all started to make sense. Like the brakes were pretty great, suspension was terrific, And once I started putting the lines together on the track and getting used to the power and everything, like the power didn't blow me away. I also didn't wind it out completely because Sonoma doesn't really have a long straightaway. But once I started to get the hang of the R1, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, like this is the position you want to be in for a track day. And it all made sense. But were I to try and live with the R1 every day, I don't think I could do it. I couldn't do it for commuting and, you know, the long trek out to the twisties. But if you're going to do just track days, oof, R1 was a lot of fun. Pretty cool sound too. Then I got the chance to ride the MT10, which was a pretty cool back-to-back to do. Same motor as the R1, but tuned a little bit more for low-end torque. A lot more comfortable, a lot more beefy feeling. So if I were to compare it to, like, if this is a quick review, compare it to my FZ09, the MT10 felt like a larger version of the FZ09, same body position. So I was immediately comfortable on it and comfortable going quick, but there's a bit of heft throwing it around, and this is purely just my subjective point of view, but it's not the prettiest bike to look at in the paddock. But once you're on it, you don't have to look at it, and it wants to wheelie, it wants to pick up the front. That inline 4 cross-plane motor just sounds so cool. Sounded just like the R1. Maybe even a little bit like more of a growl to it. Brakes were fantastic, and suspension, this was the MTSP, so the suspension was really nice too. And the biggest difference I noticed between the suspension of my FZ09 and say the R1 or the MT10 SP was just a lot more compliant going over bumps. Like, you start to, there's an off-camber turn at Sonoma that is kind of scary, because if you're on the brakes, you're going downhill. Try to be off the brakes before you hit that corner. But on the R1 and MT10 with these like nicer suspensions, it's like, oh, you can take these corners pretty quick. It actually gave me more confidence riding my FZ09 through that corner, even though it feels a little bit more shaky. I don't know, that's the best way I can describe it. And then finally, I got to ride the R7, which was probably my favorite, especially if you're just going to be doing track days. The brakes were fantastic. The chassis and suspension felt great. The power was definitely fun, like perfect for a track like Sonoma, where by the time I was wound all the way out, it was time to brake again. Immediately comfortable on the R7. I think that would be a great track day learning bike and weapon for just having fun if you're thinking about doing track days, or you don't want to spend the money on a more expensive bike that it's gonna take longer to learn on. Like, if you were to jump straight to the R1 and go to a track day, I think you would learn a lot less than if you got an R7 and just track the hell out of that as much as possible, and you would learn really quick on it and not be overwhelmed by the power or anything like that. And it just transitions side to side really nicely. One of the highlights of a Z2 track day too is having that one-on-one experience with a trainer. So I was lucky enough to be paired up with Lisa, who is on a tricked out R3, and she was hauling through the corners. I decided to ask her if she could show me the lines around Sonoma that I should be taking, and then I would follow her for a couple laps, and then she would follow me for a couple of laps, and then she gave me a few pointers. One thing I hadn't considered too is track behavior, which isn't something I think is explained very often, but what I was told is when you do your passing at a track day, you want to hold a line. So if you are passing somebody in a straight and you're going towards a corner, you want to hold that line. You don't want to weave back in front of them, especially in the novice and intermediate classes, because you're basically going back into their line. So if you make the pass on somebody, hold that line and brake at that. You might have to brake a little bit earlier into your corner, but hold that line, because it's much scarier for the person that you just passed if you swipe in front of them. So what I was told from Lisa was that I was quick and I was doing a good job hitting my lines, and I was setting up where if somebody was hitting an apex, I would go a little bit wider, and then I could cut inside of them once they were hitting a straightaway or something like that, which was fine. But once I passed them, then I was cutting back into the racing line, which is not something you want to do on a track day, because if you're doing any swerving back and forth or weaving, I have a couple of examples, it just makes it harder for people who are riding around you to predict what you're doing or where you're going to be on the track as you start to brake or turn or things like that. So just be mindful of being predictable, hold your lines, don't worry about what's happening behind you or around you, just focus on your turn, hitting your line, and then holding that line. Don't go like side to side weaving or anything like that. That's a main point that I found out, and that was like after that clicked and Lisa had explained it to me, that was when she said, hey, if you want to go to intermediate now, you probably could later today. And that's going to be a whole nother video, what it's like at an intermediate track day, because it's a different can of worms where the skill level ranges quite a bit. And I would say for just my personal experience, like in the novice class, it was me and maybe like 2 or 3 other guys who were kind of passing or the quicker part of the group. So it's a little less dangerous if you're the one who's faster out there. But you know what? Overall, amazing experience. Highly recommend the novice school, the Z2 trainers and people who are out there riding with you will show you exactly where you need to go and are super helpful when it comes to just learning what the ins and outs of the track riding experience. And finally, what made this track day even more special was that it was the Yamaha R World. And so if you ever have an opportunity to do it, I highly recommend it. We got all our pictures for free from Got Blue Milk, and he does a terrific job, hits a bunch of corners during the day, gets a lot of cool angles and stuff of the bikes. So also make sure to toss on some numbers on your bike when you're out there, just so it's easier for him and you to find your pictures later. But also the demo bikes was amazing. Colin Edwards was out on the track riding around at the same time, which was a pretty cool thing to see. I got a commemorative placard. So you know what, Yamaha and Z2, you've got a fan in me for life. I really appreciate all the instructors and how helpful they were, and all the work that goes into doing one of these events and to do it safely. I think if you are considering doing a track day, see if you can find a provider that does some of these services. If you're curious, go to Z2's website. They have a lot of information on prepping your bike, prepping yourself, what gear you need to bring. Now, I do have to add the caveat that track days are absolutely safer to ride than riding on the street, but you do have to worry about the people around you. And in novice class, I came out unscathed. I got lucky, but a friend of mine that I was riding with actually got clipped from behind from another rider and went down. Fortunately, he wasn't too beat up, but he hurt his wrist and his bike was trashed. He had ended up riding his bike to the track and met me there, but fortunately I was there to load his bike up in the back of my truck and take it back to his place. But that is something that could happen. So you have to be aware track days can be dangerous, but they are far safer than riding at speed like you would at a track day on the street. There's no gravel, there's no cars cutting across, but that's why I think you do really have to have the right track day mentality. You're not winning a race. You don't need to cut on the inside to pass people. Be careful. Think about what you're doing before you make a pass. And it is hard. Like sometimes you get out there and you feel the bloodlust, or you just want to race or go fast and you're pushing it. But think about the riders around you. Try to be predictable. Hold your lines. And truthfully, you'll have a great time. You'll learn a lot, and I can't recommend it enough. I'm hooked now.